Hello, hockey, basketball, and soccer fans. My name is David. I thought I would start this video at 1:34 on the morning of Saturday, 7th of October, 2023, North American Eastern Time. Well, 5:34, the same morning, GMT. Thought I would do is discuss, it'll be mainly about the, preseason play by Canada's NHL teams, although I do intend to discuss the Raptors, as well as how Canadian professional sports teams just can't rely on analytics to drive their play. So first, I'm just gonna mention briefly, early on Friday evening Eastern Time, got an interesting article sent to a bunch of Apple devices of mine about a coming blockage of news in Canada by Google from Bloomberg News. Does that mean changes to the way that anyone who's using a Canadian VPN gets to upload videos to YouTube? Although I hope not. I'll have to see what happens. The implications of this intent, this rejection by Google of legislation and of having to pay media providers for news content. So I'm not sure what that's going to mean. It may very well mean that I use effective after that blockage goes into effect for sports news, using some combo of Bing, Microsoft, and Yahoo for internet searches. Because if sports news can't be searched on Google, then I'm going to see as soon as possible finding alternatives so that I can at least do that. But it sucks. Hope it's resolved soon, but it's not looking good. At least I've been able to make do for the most part without using Facebook to view news. But I have to think about VPN, getting a foreign VPN just to try to get around that news blockage. But enough of that. I'm going to get into preseason play by Canadian teams, and February this year, under 24 hours after the Leafs had lost 5-2 a home game to the Bruins. The last game the Leafs had played before the 2023 NHL All-Star break. The response by Justin Bourne, co-host of the daily via Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Real Kipper and Bourne Show, about having wanted to know who among then members of the Leafs roster outside the Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander quartet was, quote, going to score, unquote. Get into that in a moment as to what the implications are, that various Canadian NHL teams had trouble, in some games at least, scoring 3 or more goals in a game, as was the case on Thursday Eastern Time in the Jets, in the Jets 3-0 loss to the Sens to conclude preseason play for the Western Canadian team. So now to go to, with preseason play for each Western Canadian team over and done with, go through various results here. So the Canucks played 6 games in preseason play this time around, over 6 games, having earned 5 points, with one of the losses having occurred in overtime to the Oilers during a game that had started on 27th of September Eastern Time. The most recent of the games was 3-1 win over the Calgary Flames, with Thatcher Demko and former Canuck Jacob Markstrom having been the starters for their respective teams. Demko for the Canucks, Markstrom for the Flames. So, Canucks had issues scoring goals in a lot of games. That 10-0 drubbing was an exception in terms of allowing more than 3 goals, but still, Canucks struggled to score in their 4 losses, having scored no more than 1 goal in any of those losses. In the wins, the Canucks scored at least 3 goals. So let's see what happens if that momentum of that win over the Flames will help the Canucks forward. After all, he was at home, so and it does help that the first game of the regular season for the Canucks, following their overtime win over the Coyotes in mid-April, is at home. Yes, they get the Edmonton Oilers, but it's in front of a home crowd, Rogers Arena. So that'll be midweek. It'll be Wednesday, 11th of October. It'll be a late one, Eastern time. Before the home set shifts to Edmonton, to Rogers Place, to conclude the series on Saturday. That game starts Saturday Eastern time. So overall, Canucks still have some questions about whether they can score goals. It'll be interesting. I mean, there's no doubt that Rick Tocchet was a big changed head coach. No guarantee, of course, that Canucks will necessarily get anywhere. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, scoring was an issue in all 4 games the Canucks lost. So let's see what happens. But again, penalty kill appeared to be better than last regular season. Defense appeared to be a little bit better. I have to see if the scoring comes. I have to see, though. I mean, there's, after all, that nagging uncertainty over whether cornerstone center Elias Pettersson will want to stay with the Canucks. That's even with Petty, as he's also known, as he's nicknamed. Still not eligible to become an unrestricted free agent unless the Canucks don't give him a qualifying offer. But I have a feeling Canucks will, or trade him. I mean, the Jets did during the 2023 offseason, trade then pending restricted free agent Pierre-Luc Dubois for 3 RFAs. The Kings sent the Jets' own way. Rasmus Kupari, Alex Affollo, and Gabe Lardy. Let's see what happens, but I'll get to the Jets in a moment, but now I'm going to go to the Edmonton Oilers. And yes, preseason... Calgary Flames. We go to Calgary Flames, so I'm trying to go geographically from west to east, if I can. At least among the Western Conference teams. So, we go there. So, preseason, Flames played 8 games. With a not great record with respect to wins and regulation, overtime, and shootout losses of 4-3-1-0. All in all, 9 points over 8 games. Not great, but again, that big win over the Canucks definitely stood out. The Flames did have problems scoring goals in 3 of their last 4 games, having lost a close OT game to the Oilers at the Saddledome on 29th September Eastern Time. A game that started on 29th September Eastern Time. And then, this week, losses on the road to the Oilers, 7-2. That the 3 ugly goals I could count, Dan Vladar, the main backup goalie for the Flames, allowed. And then, on Friday, game that ended, sometime I believe early Saturday Eastern Time, started the previous evening Eastern Time, 3-1. Markstrom playing against his most recent former team, the Canucks. It was not good. Flames flamed out. So let's see what happens. That swap between of Yegor Sharangovich and Tyler Toffoli in that trade with the Devils. Have to see what happens, but it's pretty much the only move, the only trade really that occurred. not exclusively involving players with sub $1 million US per season cap hits. So let's see what happens. Will it work? We'll see. But Flames lost 2 straight Wolves regulation. So serious questions I have to ask. Where's the defense? I mean, last 3 games. 3 straight games, the Flames have allowed at least 3 goals. 5-4 win regulation over the Jets. So that's got some serious question here. I mean 5-3 home loss to the Kraken. Definitely that. So with the defense there, we'll have to see. 11th of October is the first game the Flames play. It'll be hosting the Jets. And then it'll be a long stint on the road with stops to play the Penguins, Capitals, Sabres, Blue Jackets, and Red Wings before returning home to face the Rangers. So we're going to be spending some time in and around the Great Lakes region for the most part. Exception being when they play the Capitals in DC. Now to head over to the Oilers, and preseason is over. So overall, rather respectable 5-2-0-1 record. So good enough for over 8 games, 11 points. And there were some issues early on with scoring a maximum of 2 goals. And after 5 games, it was the Oilers had not managed to score any of them more than 2 goals. They picked up things, with big wins over the Kraken 4-1, Flames 7-2, and Kraken again 3-1. So, Campbell and Skinner for the most part looked good, and it's going to be interesting what the battle, what Jay Woodcroft and the rest of the coaching staff decide on goaltending between Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner. Last season it was kind of a mixed bag. Regular season, Skinner was the better goalie between the two. In the postseason, Campbell actually shone through when he was used, albeit in a limited role. So it'll be interesting because Campbell got that insane per season cap hit, $5 million I believe for 4 more seasons. So we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be an upcoming, rather important home-and-home series with the Canucks. It'll be, next week's going to be on the Wednesday and Saturday Eastern Time. So the Wednesday Eastern Time is going to be a road game against the Canucks, and then a home game against the Canucks. Then it's out on the road for 2 straight. Against the Preds on the 17th of October, and then on the 19th of October against the Flyers. And then to kind of split between home and away, and it's going to be very interesting to see at least. So now we go to the Winnipeg Jets, and the Winnipeg Jets squad that ended the preseason with a 2-3-0-1 record after 6 games, 5 points, not great. That includes 4 straight losses, and got some, there have to be some serious questions. First game was in a shootout. It was a win. Against Calgary Flames, there was a shootout loss. So, 2 of the first 3 games, the Jets struggled to score goals, having not scored more than 2 in either of those games. And in 2 more games, the Jets struggled to score goals, having lost the home-and-home series of the Sens 3-1 over at the Canadian Tire Center late last month, and then on Thursday Eastern Time at Canada Life Center. Excuse me. So yes, Jets have legitimate issues about how they're going to score, how they're going to generate goals, and I I've heard that that remark earlier on. Daytime, Real Kipper and Bourne show, claimed by Justin Bourne. Who's gonna score? So let's look at the Jets games, which they scored at most this many goals. So the first of those games was a 2-1 shootout win over the Oilers. Colin Delia, a former Canuck, was goalie record. That was the first game of preseason play. Game number 3 was a 3-2 shootout loss to the Flames. Oskari Salminen was the goalie of record. So that was a loss in a shootout. So far, unbeaten in regulation. But the very next, that's 20th of September Eastern Time when it started. The following game, so that the fourth game, was a 3-1 loss to the Sens. And, well, yeah. So already we have 2 losses, one regulation and one in a shootout, when the Jets had managed to score at most this many goals in the game. And then the 3-0 loss. So, yeah. Relying on Hellebuck and Laurent Brossoit, not a winning strategy. Have to see what happens. Certainly legitimate questions about whether the Jets are going to see playoff action. I mean, I see among the Western Canadian teams the Flames likely to miss, even if they finish in third in the Western Conference wildcard race. Why would I say this? Limited offseason moves made by new Flame GM Craig Conroy. So I'm going to bet against the Flames seeing playoff action, even if they end up missing by a couple points as they did last season. I see the Canucks, I see the Oilers as a playoff team among the Western Canadian teams, and the Canucks and Jets as potential playoff teams. Please note, however, I say potential because if either of those the last two teams, sees playoff action, I don't anticipate either is going to finish higher than 4th in this division. Simple as that. I see the Leafs as a playoff team via a finish at a top 3 divisional spot. Of course, things can go off the rails. You never know what can happen. I'll get to the Leafs in a moment. So yes, now I'm going to get to the Leafs. To hit the ice on Saturday evening Eastern Time at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit in the southeast of Michigan in the local Wings squad. So yeah, home and home series against the Wings. So got some serious issues with the Leafs. I mean, yes, Leafs have a rather respectable 4-1-2-0 record. No game has been decided in a shootout since last season. I don't know when the last shootout decision was for the Leafs, win or loss, but yeah, that's encouraging. Martin Jones has a goalie acquired off free agency. Has gone unbeaten in regulation. Samsonov, despite having allowed this many ugly goals I could count against the Wings, certainly still gone unbeaten. I mean, the Leafs offense was there. Pretty much an NHL caliber lineup. The problem I have with the Leafs, though, is that there are a lot of games. Their first 2 games against the Sens were, 3 goals or more allowed. Not good. Yes, the Leafs are have only one regulation loss so far this preseason, but, and at worst, will finish with a 4-2-2-0 record. That said, the way in which the Leafs end up losing the first 2 games, concerning. And the last 2 games have been quite a bit of a concern, too. 5-4 overtime loss to the Habs via a goal scored 31 seconds into overtime by Nick Suzuki, the captain of the winning team. And yes, Detroit Red Wings, in overtime, William Nylander having scored the game-winning goal. But yes, the fact the game needed overtime at all, indication. Not just the Leafs, the Leafs had the offense, but it's the defense that's really sucked in that game. So that's, this many games, Leafs have allowed at least this many goals. And overall, Leafs have, in that series of games, 1 win, 2 overtime, 1 win, 1 regulation loss, and 2 overtime losses. Okay, so Leafs have earned, in those games, half the available points. But that's misleading. Because although, yes, okay, Leafs earned half the available points, have so far, this preseason earned half the available points in those games which they've allowed at least this many goals. Problem is, come postseason time, there are no points for overtime losses. And that could be a serious problem. Leafs are going to have to figure it out. I'm not sure how they're going to do so, because the Leafs need to free up almost $3 billion in cap space to get compliant with this season's cap. How Brad Treliving, the new GM of the Leafs, is going to do that, we'll have to see. But with 1 more game left, we'll have to see what happens with the Leafs. Never know what that happen. Now I'm going to go on to the Senators. The Senators team that has looked good so far this preseason, having gone 4 straight games. Incredible, isn't it? During which they have allowed this many goals at most. And have scored at least this many goals. Things are looking good. Of course, Sens may still falter. I mean, last season I believe they started off with 4 wins and 2 regulation losses, and then they leave a 6-game losing streak that featured all such losses having come in regulation, and they had trouble recovering. Last preseason, the Jets, I believe, they went on an incredible run, but barely saw playoff action. I mean, 95 points in the regular season, not good, barely qualified. They limped in, they limped out, and, I have to see what happens, but there's no doubt. Sens look good in the preseason. Let's see what happens when they play a more diverse opponents. So, Sens will start on the road, then have a huge homestand that covers all but 2 of the remaining 7 games. So it'll be against Canes next week, Wednesday Eastern Time, and then a huge homestand where they host the Flyers, Bolts, Capitals, Wings, and Sabres. Sens can win a whole bunch of games, get a whole bunch of points. I see the chance pretty good that the Sens are going to stay in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference, perhaps until late March, early April. I mean, November I have a whole bunch of games at home, so we'll have to see what happens. Because when the Sens hit the road, which they'll have to do for more games than home ones from December onward, we'll be able to see what happens. Now we'll go to the Habs, the last team I have from Canada, and yeah, it's not been a great preseason. They have 1 more game left, an away game against Sens. Then you just go home, recover a little bit, and then on the 11th, it's going to be going away, albeit just down to Toronto, to the Scotiabank Arena, to face the Leafs. But first preseason, the Habs have struggled to score goals in some of their games. When they've scored at most this many goals, they have not won a single game, having lost in regulation to the Devils at home, and 2 games to Leafs at home. The Habs have 2 wins, and in 5 games, so 4 points. So a win over the Sens will mean the Habs finish with half the available points. But again, even if they do, the issues are still there. Defense hasn't been particularly good. I mean, 3-1 So again, let's take a look here. So 4-2 loss, 4-2 loss to the Devils, 4-3 regulation win over the 4-3 regulation win over the Sens, 3-1 loss to the Leafs, and a 5-4 OT win over the Leafs. So that's 1 win and 3 losses when the Habs have allowed at least this many goals. So it's been 4 games where the Habs have allowed at least 3 goals. Not good. Okay, it's a rebuild. I mean, I don't expect the Habs to come anywhere near the playoff spot, even if they're entertaining to watch. October is going to feature, for the Habs, a bunch of home games. They only play the Leafs once, but that'll be at home. That'll be at Scotiabank Arena. But then the Habs go home for 3 in a row, and then they go play the Sabres, and then the Habs will play their first game outside the North American Great Lakes region when they go to Vegas in a game start on 30th. The game start on 30th of October Eastern Time at T-Mobile Arena in that southern Nevada city. Continuing into November with stops at Mull Arena to play the Coyotes and the Enterprise Center to play the Blues before returning home to play the Bolts. Then go back on the road to play the Wings, so it's going to be kind of a split between, away and home. It's kind of almost even or so, but a lot of home time in December and January, February as well. March, completing some road games. Kind of April, kind of more even, more home games, or maybe home games the road day. But again, so now to do is go and discuss injuries among players on Canadian teams. So, a couple of defensemen went down in the most recent game they played. Ville Heinola returned to his native Finland to recover from an injury stint, fractured ankle. That is expected to see him miss a minimum of 8 weeks. Jets, as far as I know, have not yet put Heinola on long-term injury reserve, but I believe it'll be a matter of days, if not hours, before they do. LTR means missing at least 10 games over 21 days, if I'm not mistaken. Feel for him. Hope he recovers. Hope he can get things going, but it doesn't look good at the moment. And Carson Soucy, who left the Canucks game, I believe in the third period, after a low-speed collision with Yegor Sharangovich of the Flames. So, yeah. Soucy, former Kraken defenseman, is out of that game due to an injury. To be determined will be if Soucy will be out any longer than just that portion of what had been his new team's most recent preseason game. So the last preseason game until next season. Regular season begins next week for the Canucks. So now to go to the NBA and the Raptors. So while the NHL regular season for Canadian teams not going to begin until next week, Wednesday Eastern Time, over the weekend on Sunday Eastern Time, the Raptors will be hosting the Sacramento Kings over at Rogers Arena in Vancouver. So it's very interesting and very interesting indeed. It's considered a home game, but again, it's going to be out west. So 4 preseason games, but again, I'll have to see what happens. How many Raptors games I'm not going to watch. There'll be a lot of Canadian NHL teams in action, and they're going to be fighting for my attention. So let's see what happens with the Raptors. But definitely, no NHL game. NHL will be taking a few days off between the preseason and regular season. So let's see what happens. Let's see how the Raptors do. But again, it's just not Let's see what happens. I mean, Fred VanVleet left via free agency. More on that a little bit later. But we'll go back to January. And so January featured claims made by Brian Hayes on Overdrive, the TSN 1050 Radio's late afternoon Eastern Time show, that the time had come for the Raps to tank. JD Bunkus, on his own podcast, claimed that the then current iteration of the Raps had been done, and that the Raps had been, quote, a bad basketball team, unquote. I plan to provide links as soon as I am able to do so after I post this video. But again, Raptors hadn't really going anywhere, and that brings up a perfect segue into claims made mid-April by Sid Seixeiro on CTV Toronto morning show Breakfast TV. Seixeiro, once upon a time, had been a co-host with Tim McAuliffe of a Sportsnet weeknight Eastern Time show, later renamed Tim and Friends. So I would say it's kind of a sideways move. Sportsnet based on in that major complex Rogers, where kind of where Bloor Street, is the northern boundary, and where Mount Pleasant goes underneath Bloor, and Jarvis kind of intersects with Bloor. That big mega complex I've passed by so many times, but haven't gotten to see. Probably won't. But again, it's kind of sideways within Rogers. Sportsnet's owned by Rogers. City TV Toronto is owned by Rogers. Difference is, for quite some time, for quite a few years now, Seixeiro's been working at Yonge Dundas Square rather than up near Jarvis and Bloor. Where 60 News, Sportsnet studios are based. Where City TV Toronto is based. Well, Yonge Dundas Square is kind of the eastern part. But yeah, so we're gonna get into that. Claims by Seixeiro, who claimed that after just hours after the Raps had lost by 4 points a play-in game with the Chicago Bulls, that the Raps hadn't been going anywhere earlier on in the regular season, and that the Raptors were going to supposedly make moves, and didn't make very many of them. Added Jakob Poeltl, who Raps President Ujiri and GM Webster had risked acquiring because it was on a short-term contract, a rental, and quite possibly Poeltl would end up walking away come June. That didn't happen. Poeltl signed a multi-season contract, but Fred VanVleet did. And yes, unsurprisingly, that loss of a play-in game, which was to be the first of two the Raps would need to win just to get into a postseason spot, was, I agree with Seixeiro, quote, a group failure, unquote. Whether this season will go better for the Raptors, we'll have to see. But there is no doubt that to conclude this video, I thought I would get into a recent episode of TSN's That's Hockey, about interview by Gino Reda, the main host of that show, of that network's scouting director, Craig Button. That episode had to do with analytics, and whether it had been a good idea for NHL teams to use them as the Blue Jays of Major League Baseball had during the second of two games of an important playoff series. I'd say the use of analytics is overrated. So-called analytics whiz kid Kyle Dubas was GM of the Leafs, and look what happened. Those Leafs ended up winning just this many playoff series, and the one that he did win during that whiz kid's tenure was barely a win. Leafs scored 2 goals in each of the last 2 games of that series against the Bolts, an overtime win of Game 6 of that series, thanks to John Tavares, who I didn't think would score the winner. I mean, there have been a lot of times when Tavares has looked slow, his foot speed just isn't there, an insane contract due to sign, a parting gift. Thankfully, things have changed with the Leafs. The culture. Although, yes, the Leafs are over the cap by almost $3 million US, even after taking into account long-term injury stints of defenseman Jake Muzzin and goalie Matt Murray. And with both of those injured players having contracts that expire in June of next year. But again, either case, they're on LTIR, so that means Leafs have over $10 million of cap space that they could use. Well, that $10 million will disappear, but in any case, players in LTR do not count as against the cap in terms of compliance. And that's important. Because if they did, we'd be talking about way more cuts, and the Leafs team would be unrecognizable, would be even less recognizable than it's likely to be. Let's see what happens over the next few days, but tough decisions remain for the Leafs. Just going to go to cap friendly and see what the cap situations of the various teams are. Of various Canadian teams are. At least among those teams that have cap hits of over $83.5 million US. So we'll also do that. I'm just going to try to, if I can. Wait, oh. Nope, sorry that. Alright, sorry that. So, I'm going to go to the Canadian teams that are over the cap. So you have the Leafs by far having the worst cap situation in the NHL at almost $3 million US over the cap. Calgary Flames are $906,000 US over. The Oilers just under $391,000 US over. So 3 Canadian teams are over the cap, even after taking into account players on LTIR. Cap hits of players on LTIR. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But now I'm going to go to teams that... Oops, sorry about that. Just kind of got to go screen freeze there. Alright, just give me a moment here. Alright, so now I'm going to go to teams that have a maximum, that have cap hits that are at worst $83.5 million. That are at their highest $83.5 million US. Canadian teams that have. So below the Flames we have a Sens team that has slightly over $1.7 million US in cap space. A Jets team that has a bit over $2.54 million US worth. Alright, so we have 1, 2, 3. We have no. I forgot to mention the Canucks. Yeah. Canucks are, yeah, so we have the, so keep in mind that, that the Canucks and Habs are compliant with the salary cap because with LTR candidates have cap space available, although very limited in the case of the Canucks at just over $457,000 US, with the Habs having slightly over $5.27 million. So that's good. So Leafs, Habs, Flames, and Oilers. So I've got those. So the Sens have, so that's 5. Jets have that 6, and then we have, where is it here? Do we have anything else? I forget here. Alright, we have, let me see here. Right, we have Leafs, Habs, Canucks, Flames, Oilers, Sens, and Jets. So yeah, so the Jets have the most cap space among Canadian teams at slightly over 2.54 million US dollars. So that is so yeah, a lot of teams. So there are teams that very limited cap space. We'll have to see what happens this season. For those teams that are not compliant with the cap, but have to become compliant for the regular season. I'm not sure how much the cap is going to go up next season, but the Canadian teams can't worry about that now, because it's this season got a cap of $83.5 million US dollars, a rather flat cap. That like cap going up by $1 million US dollars a season. Last couple seasons, so we'll have to see what happens. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this video up. If you like the video, please make sure to click the like button. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you click the notification bell, you'll receive more timely notifications of videos that I put out. I try to put out videos at least every other week. On that note, I'm going to say, go Leafs go Raptors go Toronto FC go, and go Canada go.